Now, I just discovered this article on Screen Rant. Alien 10 questions we still want answered. And I had a look at them and I thought, most of these are actually already kind of answered in the film. So let's have a look at the questions and see if the film does actually answer them, or if we can actually answer them ourselves without needing to write an article saying 10 questions we still want answered. So the first question we come down to is, why didn't Kane notice anything prior? Now, Kane is the guy who's the chest burster, the small alien, burst out of his chest. So the facehugger implanted on his face, then it later burst out of his chest. So why didn't he notice anything prior in his chest? That's the question that's being raised here. Surely you would know this thing is in you. Well, a tick can bite. Apparently people don't know a tick is biting them. Leeches can latch on and people don't know until they see it. Vampire bats can attack the wild stock that they feed on, and the wild stock doesn't even know they've been bitten. And people can have tumours and non-malignant tumours, like tumours that aren't vicious or anything like that to the body, and they don't feel these things inside of them. When you have a large meal, you might feel full, but you don't physically necessarily feel exactly, hey, I've got this large sort of lump of food in my stomach. So the internal senses might be a little bit different to the external. Plus, when you look at some of the creatures that anaesthetise the area around, it would make sense, or it would be quite easily believable, that he could have this thing within him and not actually even feel it. Does a pregnant woman feel the baby 24/7 or only when it kicks and moves? That kind of thing. So I don't think that's really a bigger deal. Okay, so we go to number 9. Why didn't anyone listen to Ripley? So the question being raised here is this. It's obvious one of the most standard horror movie conventions. One of the characters always warns against a certain course of action. No one listens and chaos and death ensues. It's entirely understandable. The crew wasn't willing to let Kane die, just suffer under some foreign alien attack without doing anything. They've all been trained in the protocols though, and Ripley initially refuses to let the others come back to the ship because the organism could contaminate the entire craft. Granted, no one could have known how bad things were going to get, but there are rules for a reason, people. Okay, yes, there are rules for a reason. So here we have a situation. This isn't a normal thing where I've gone outside, I've been contaminated, and I'm asking you to let me in. I am outside of the craft. I have a limited supply of oxygen. I am going to die. So in this case, especially with Dallas, the commander, saying, I order you to open the ship, and Ripley says no, while you were outside, I take on the commander responsibilities of the ship, and we cannot risk coming inside here. So there's a particular rule, but we also have general quarantine rules, and that is if someone needs to be quarantined, we have rules and procedures to quarantine them. So in the case of Dallas and Lambert, who are outside of the ship with Kane, the thing is Lambert's the woman and Kane is the guy that got infected. They are going to die because they can't come in and change spacesuits, and the spacesuits have self-contained air. Unless they are brought in, those two will die, and so will Kane. He will also die externally, and that will just leave the two mechanics, Brett and Parker, and Ripley and the science officer, Ash. Now, it wasn't Ripley that brought them in. It wasn't Kane that brought them in. It was the science officer, Ash, who opened the hatchway, and of course we find out later that he was under orders from Mother, from his assignment, that the alien was top priority and all other priorities rescinded. In other words, all of the humans were expendable, just get the alien sample back. So it's not that no one listened to her, and as Ash explained, what were they going to do anyway? Let everybody die. Okay, so it was Ash's fault, and he was under specific orders to bring the alien in. What were those other aliens? Now, granted, we don't know what the space jockey was, but it was clear that he had a facehugger that had been implanted in him, or an alien had been implanted in him, the small one, and that had burst out of his chest. We could see that because they specifically mention it when they're looking at his body. It looks like something has burst out of his chest and broken his rib cages. We don't need to know what he was. It has no bearing on the movie. The only thing that has a bearing is that we know something similar happened to him. Something inside exploded out of his chest. His origins don't mean anything to the movie. So the question of what were they, or in that case, him or he, she, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It's like finding a car crash. And you come to the car and you're going to be asking, what model or make of car is this? It doesn't matter. It's setting the scene. No one really cares. It doesn't. Does answering that question help you? No, it doesn't help you. Okay, so how did the alien get where it was? The title of Alien is the creature that is shrouded in a lot of mystery, but there is some questions about that just need to be answered. For instance, how did it even get to this abandoned place? I'm pretty sure it rode on the inside of the space jockey. He's landed the ship there. It's clearly stated it was not indigenous to that planet. This is stated in Aliens when they're going over the whole thing. Nothing was growing on that planet. It arrived on the other alien's spaceship. This is already explained. The answer has already come out. It's clear that it came on the other guy, burst out of his chest. It must have been a female, and that female then laid all those eggs, and without any food or anything to feed on, eventually just went away somewhere and perished. That's the logical conclusion. Okay. How did the facehugger penetrate the spacesuit? Well, it didn't penetrate the spacesuit. It's penetrated the dome on his mask. And when you have a look at the dome itself, it looks bent in, as if the dome itself is made of some kind of plastic and not glass. So in Aliens, we see that the facehuggers are actually in glass tubes with water. They can't really get out of there. However, the fact that his whole face mask looks like it has been melted in and bent in indicates to me, at least, that it was not glass and was some kind of a plastic. And in this case, we're talking about some mechanism that penetrated through the plastic. And we're not going to know what that is. It might have been some kind of a heat. It might have been some kind of demolecularizing thing, such as acetone can penetrate certain plastics and so on and so forth. So there's a feasible answer that can explain how that happened. Now, if his face thing was glass, then there's no explanation for why the glass melted in, except to say it must have been superheated, and there's no evidence it was superheated, otherwise his face would have been scorched. Why does it require a host body? Because it does. There are lots of things. It's obviously clearly not able to just implant. The facehugger cannot implant the embryo into just air and the embryo becomes a fully grown thing. It needs to absorb nutrients from a host, just like a human baby is absorbing the nutrients from the mother to grow to a certain size before it comes out. It's just that in this case, the nutrients and size growing is rather rapid. So that's why it requires a host. In my opinion, that's why it requires a host. How does anything living have acidic blood? Well, the problem is that when you're looking at it from your own point of view and you're looking at it from your own blood and your blood's not acidic, and it's like, okay, hey, but then we've got something here. So having blood that can eat through steel but somehow doesn't erode flesh is inexplicable. Well, actually, when Ash is studying the alien, he says it has a habit of replacing its cells with, I think he says the term, is polarized silicon. What does that mean? It makes it a really tough bugger. We can't kill it. It makes it impervious to the environment that it's in, which is, I think, the next question. How does the alien survive the ship's atmosphere? Again, Ash has explained this. The thing with the acid for blood, we have acid in our stomach, and our stomach is not deteriorating left, right and centre, and yet that same acid can actually be quite devastating on things outside of our stomach. So it is quite possible you can have very acidic blood that does not damage your inside. Now, how does it survive the ship's atmosphere of the Nostromo? Well, it's obviously not native to anywhere. You had that green laser light, so there was some kind of mist under the laser light, so that was obviously some kind of protective thing for the eggs. But once the thing is hatched, it keeps replacing its cells with polarized silicon. It sheds its skin. It becomes hardened to the environment. That's how it can survive. I thought that was answered already in the movie as well. How did the aliens survive, period? The aliens are obviously a pretty hardy species since they managed to survive in a barren wasteland for an undetermined amount of time. Well, they only needed to survive as long as it took to lay the eggs. Once the ship had landed, there's no reason to believe the ship was catastrophically failed and all the bad air rushed in. So at that point in time, the facehugger has come out. There's been enough still people and whatever, I guess, to provide nutrients. The chest bursters come out. Whoever was left on that ship was enough to provide nutrients, I would assume. It grew, it laid eggs, it then perished after that because there was nothing left for it to do. I'm not really sure that it didn't survive. The eggs survived, but then they were covered by a layer of mist, and we don't know how many of those eggs were actually active and even capable of sprouting aliens. Just because there's a lot of eggs there doesn't mean they hadn't all perished at some point in time. And why was there only one? This is the last question. Although we only see one fully grown xenomorph, there are facehuggers as well as what looks like eggs on the planet that the Nostromo lands on that the crew explores. What exactly is it? Why exactly is it that there is only one fully grown alien there? Well, I'm not sure there was a fully grown alien there and only one. We have no idea what was there. A female can just lay eggs endlessly for a period of time, as we see in Aliens. There could have been a whole hive of them, then without any food, they've all just gone and perished, and we don't see them. Only one facehugger to one life form, to one chest burster, to one alien. So one facehugger ends up giving one fully grown alien. You only need one, a female, to lay all of those eggs, and only one of those eggs needs to hatch inside someone in the Nostromo. Why would anyone else have all eggs attached to them? Why would the facehugger lay 5 eggs or something? It clearly didn't. It laid 1 egg. So the question itself doesn't seem to mean anything. We have clearly seen outside of in Aliens that when multiple facehuggers can hatch multiple beings, you end up with multiple aliens. The question was already answered in 1986 after the 1979 movie Alien. It wasn't really answered, but you clearly saw the female, something had to lay the eggs, and if there are more than one host, then there will be more than one alien that is spawned. So the reason we only see one is because only one facehugger attacked a person. That's why we only seen one. We don't see any on the actual planet or planetoid or small world that they land on. So they are all the questions from Screen Rant. I feel that they were kind of already answered within the movie. They're not really questions. I think the biggest question that should need to be asked, instead of why didn't anyone listen to Ripley, it's why didn't anyone listen to Parker, who said, "Why don't you freeze him? Why don't you freeze him?" If they had frozen Kane, Kane would have been totally frozen. Nothing could have burst from his chest because all would have been frozen. Then they could have taken him to a secure lab back on Earth and it would have been no problem. That's the biggest question. Why didn't Dallas and Ripley, Dallas first because once he was back on the ship he became commander, authorize the freezing of Kane, who clearly was in a very bad state with the facehugger on his face and the whole thing? That is the biggest question. Some of these are not And some of these are answered in the movies. Anyway, that's all I've got for this video. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think. Do you think these questions were answered in the movies? Or do you have other questions about the movies that you think, about the movie, Alien, that should have been answered but weren't? Or anything like that? Let me know in the comments below. Share the video if you can. And until next time, thanks for watching.